Welcome. My name is Blair, and I come to you from wonderful Vancouver. I wanted to talk today about time series prediction for buildings as part of my research into neural nets, as part of the Energy in Cities group at the University of Victoria. This presentation comes about as I've received some feedback from audience members as I present my results that they'd like more details on the neural nets that I use in my research. However, up against strict time limits, I can't spend too much time on explaining the neural nets because I need to get to the results. So to address this, I wanted to make this presentation just completely focus on the 4 different types of neural nets I use in my research. This is the smart building that I use for the basis of my research. There's all different types of building data streams associated with this building, and I specifically focus on the 4 rooftop units on the top of the building and their airflow. This is an example of what those airflows look like. On the left-hand side, we see a 7-day moving average of the airflow with the years overlaid. And then on the right-hand side, we see a 6-hour moving average with the weeks overlaid. Already, the viewers can see different structure from the data emerging, but the thing to take away here is that the data is very noisy. 4 neural net architectures are considered in the research. The first one is a convolutional neural net in a residual neural net architecture. Next, we have a recurrent neural network. Next, we have a temporal dilated convolutional neural network. In the literature and this presentation, it's just shortened to WaveNet. And lastly, we consider a hybrid net, which is a blend of a ResNet and an ResNet. These are studied under 2 different types of prediction conditions. The first one is a short-term, high-resolution forecast, and the other one is an annual aggregated prediction. Something I just wanted to make viewers aware of is that there's so many different types of architectures that I don't consider in this presentation. I kind of imagine it like this dashboard where there's all sorts of switches and buttons and knobs to turn and tweak. There's just so many different parameters that I can't really get to all of them in this short presentation, but it's something I just wanted to make viewers aware of. The perfect place to start talking about artificial neural nets is with the human brain, because there are some really interesting similarities. We don't often think of the human brain as this like probability machine that just outputs classifications or predictions, but under certain assumptions, that's exactly what this is. The similarities are a bit easier to see if we think about an animal brain that's just classifying food or predicting where certain prey will be. We kind of have to remove human culture and human philosophy, and then these similarities become more clear. This is a neuron, and here how it works is that when there is a reward, those connections are strengthened between neurons. And when there's a disincentive, those connections between different neurons are turned down. How this works with neural nets is those neurons instead take the form of linear algebra, where you're trying to make the 2 sides equal. In practice, this is really complicated. There's also different configurations and different chains of these, but this is in essence what it is. And here, as the air goes down, those weights and biases that represent connections between layers are tuned to reduce the air further. There are some other mechanisms to consider. On the left, we have the air function. There are all sorts of different types of error functions depending on the data that's being trained. But in essence, you just need some sort of metric to know how close the prediction is to the ground truth. The mechanism that actually tunes all these weights is the optimizers. Again, there's all sorts of different types of optimizers that have pros and cons depending on the type of problem space that one's looking at. So I just wanted to introduce now the concept of convolution. Mathematically, it's when one function is applied to another function. We don't often think of a time series as a function, but under certain assumptions, that's exactly what it is. Sometimes something called a kernel or one function is then applied to the time series. This might be a bit more familiar view of the convolutional layer, but there we see the kernel scanning the sequence, scanning the image data, and what it's doing is it's sort of doing a mathematical transform of the data and sort of projecting it to a latent space and sort of encoding it mathematically. And this is normally what we call the features of the data. And that's really is sort of starting to uncover the structure, starting to uncover some of the features and characteristics of the underlying raw data. Another characteristic to consider is what a residual network is. And these convolutional layers are structured in a very particular way with skipped connections. And so what you can see here on the left is that when you feed in the output of a layer and also its input, nets are able to extract more structure and more knowledge from the raw data. And then they're constructing these sort of blocks with skipped connections. And this is sort of where the idea of deep learning comes in. Now I want to talk about a bit about recurrent neural networks. They were specifically developed to predict and classify sequences. They're very similar to a normal linear layer with the addition of something called a state memory. And as the sequence is fed into the layer, that state memory can be updated to sort of encode different patterns and features of the sequence to improve accuracy in the classification or the prediction. How I kind of think of it is this. Here is my crew, and as the training data sequence is fed in on the conveyor belt, different patterns can be sussed out. So if we can always know that when you get the output of an A, that C comes before D, comes before G, this is what the state memory is encoding and leads to such high performance when you use a recurrent neural network. Next, we come to the WaveNet, and this is a modification of a convolutional layer where specifically the dilation parameter is being increased as the depth of the network is increased as well. This was originally developed for audio signals, and it really allows features at different scales to be encoded and understood. If we think of an audio signal, there's different scales involved, and on the very shortest high resolution scale, the sounds would be unintelligible if you didn't understand the very high resolution features of the data. But as the dilation increases, meaning in audio is actually a very long, large structure to understand. And that's where the dilation comes into effect, that you can capture all the different features of different scales with a WaveNet. So this all gets put together, and the reasons why you would want to use a neural net is in smart buildings. This stuff is just so cool. As your predictions are improved, it gives building operators and data analysts the opportunity to make their optimization better. It becomes this very positive feedback cycle. The specific application in smart buildings is something called model predictive control. And this is something that's found in many different building systems. You could imagine that a wheel in the center might take a very long time to speed up. So those building sensors on the right are sort of trying to understand all the different metrics in the building. And the model needs to predict when to start the work optimally so that those louvers on the right side open and make sure that all the occupants of the building are comfortable. And the neural net would sit right in the model. So now we come to this overview of all the different types of neural net architectures discussed side by side. I'll draw your attention on the right to the hybrid net, which you can see here is the residual net, and then also the RNN on the end. So you might be asking yourself, which one is the best? Which one is the most accurate? Which one is the most performant? Well, that answer will have to wait until my paper is published in the fall of 2023 with my supervisor, Dr. Ralph Evans. Thank you very much.